Jai Hind and welcome to Dev Talks. This is Aadi. The Afghanistan-Pakistan conundrum. I think that's the only way I'm going to put it across. To discuss this, I have with me Lieutenant General Gautam Moorthy, PVSM, AVSM, VSM, a former Director General of the Ordnance Services of the Indian Army. He was commissioned into the Army Ordnance Corps in June 1975. Currently, the founder of CASA, Current and Strategic Affairs Forum, a forum that discusses, just like us, current and strategic affairs concerning India and their repercussions for security around in the region. Sir, thank you so much for joining me today for this very interesting discussion of a father and son story that have gone astray, the Afghanistan-Pakistan conundrum.
Thank you very much, Aadi, and wish you and your viewers a very happy new year. And let us hope 2022 is not as bad as 2021 and brings the temperature down on all our borders. Thank you.
True, sir. But till then, I think we will have to study the heat and we will have to find out where things are going right and wrong for us. As a matter of fact, we were just discussing the same thing offline as well, sir. So before we dwell into the subject, I'd like to, we all know what happened in Afghanistan. I think it's been done and dusted, discussed over and over again. People have pointed fingers all around the place, including the US, including Pakistan, and so on and so forth. There's been a lot of talk about that. But also we know the Taliban, and we all understand Taliban is not a monolith. There are multiple fractions. There's called the Kandahar fraction, the Haqqani fraction, and so on and so forth. And there are multiple other small groupings within the place. May I request you to kind of tell us who are the major ones that the Pakistanis deal with, and what kind of relations that they share with the Pakistanis, where some friction arises, sir?
Right, Adi. You started by referring to this relationship as a father and son relationship. I would rather refer to it more as a between two brothers, a relationship where two brothers have their interests in property, their interests, I mean real estate, their interests in ideology, a shared interest in religion, but at some level they are squabbling. As a family, they may put up a united front, but at some level, there's an elder brother, younger brother aspect to it. And the younger brother does not like an overbearing elder brother, as in any relationship. Now, about the factions per se, just remember the unity that got the Taliban the victory. It is splintering under pressure of huge internal divisions. From August till today, that's almost 5 months, 6 months going, these guys have not been able to get their act together, put up a united front, take up issues that with Pakistan as well as with the international players, and get what is good for Pakistan or what is good for Afghanistan and the people. There is a looming economic and humanitarian catastrophe that is going on. The lines are crossed, the swords have crossed, they've drawn swords between the two. You've heard about earlier, there were some bullets rang out. Abdul Ghani Baradar disappeared for a while. Now he's come back. Now his power base is in Kandahar. There is a UN-sanctioned terrorist who's very much in power, Sirajuddin Haqqani. He's close to Al-Qaeda, close to Pakistan. The DGISI, when these people had taken over power, flew in triumphantly into Kabul at the Serena Hotel, and very nonchalantly was having a cup of tea with the Taliban. Now, what does it all tell you? There is a cleavage, basically, because between the Baradar group, which has actually negotiated the ceasefire, and this Haqqani faction, which is now sitting, it's the most anti-Western face. It appeals to Pakistan, but Pakistan is also not sure. As far as the factions within them are concerned, there is the ISIS Khorasan, ISIS-K, which is about 4,000 to 5,000 members. It's a local faction in eastern Afghanistan, mainly in Kunar and Nangarhar provinces. It is has capacity for attacks, but it's not taking on any direct confrontation with the Taliban. Maybe they're trying to build capacity by exploiting publicity of some high-profile attacks that have taken place across the border. There is no evidence yet of their institutional presence as such, which enable them to sustain the Taliban. Pakistan is not likely to risk the links with the Taliban by offering some sustenance to a rival. So ISIS-K is playing an important yet deadly role in between. And the thing about these Taliban groups, Mujahideen groups, Al-Qaeda groups, affiliates, that one has seen over the past 3 decades or so. See, the groups move into, the people move into a group, move out of it, 3 guys get together, they break away, they set up another group, and each one trying to, prove more loyal to their ideology and to their religion, takes on targets, many of them high profile, so that they can assert themselves. So there are these attacks that could undermine Haqqani's control over the government. Now, we do not know how they're going to play it, but ISIS Khorasan, take it from me, it will be a very major player. The other player, which is a minor player today, is the entire Panjshir movement. Now, Panjshir, as you know, that the Northern Alliance held up against the old Taliban, and Ahmad Shah Massoud's son, Ahmed Massoud, all of 32 or 33, is joined by Amarullah Saleh, who was vice president left. They're relying on the past glory. There are videos of the Taliban moving in, committing atrocities in the Panjshir Valley. Many people have fled the Panjshir Valley. We really do not know what their strength is, what is the kind of equipment that they have, and are there any skirmishes, because nothing has come out. Are they making peace with the Taliban? Are they fighting with the Taliban? They claim to have stocks of weapons, equipment. They say a lot of their own special forces fighters of the Afghan army have joined them. But that force would struggle to take over Afghan cities. Now, as you know, the center of gravity of Afghanistan is Kabul. And of course, the districts. I think they've got about 30 districts. Each district has a governor. As of now, there is no foreign support that seems imminent. India is hedging its bets. The US, Europe, China, Russia, all of them are hedging their bets. And if I dare say, even Pakistan does not know which way the Panjshir movement will take place and whether there is a movement at all. In the last 6 months, nothing has really happened. Maybe they're agreeing with the Taliban to a live and let live kind of a thing. Let us govern the the Panjshir Valley, and we won't trouble you. One really doesn't know. So I will not speculate on what's likely to happen. As of now, this is a situation which I'd like to share with your viewers. The third force are the old warlords forces, each one having their own army. Heard about Abdul Rashid Dostum, Uzbek. He maneuvered his way to influence in northern Afghanistan. He's been shifting positions. He was an army commander during the Soviet intervention in the 80s. Then he broke away, joined the march to Kabul, then went with the Northern Alliance, fought alongside Massoud. Then he became a key link with the US operations that forced the Taliban out in 2001. There have been accusations of war crimes against him. He became vice president in 2014, but then he fled to Turkey after a fracas. I think he punched a political rival or so. Then he returned to Mazar-e-Sharif. There have been assassination attempts on him. But right now, from what one has seen from open sources, he is withdrawn to Uzbekistan as the Taliban have taken over. He's no longer there. Whether he's a force to reckon with in the future, one doesn't know. The other person who was the Tajik who was allied with Dostum is Ata Mohammed Noor. He was a Mujahideen commander in the 1980s again, and then with the Northern Alliance. And then from last 14 years, from 2004 to 2018, he was the governor in Mazar-e-Sharif. Right now also he is supposed to be in Uzbekistan with Dostum. So they have pledged alliance with Masood. Now it's unclear how many fighters they can send to the Panjshir Valley, let alone mount attacks on the Taliban. And Noor has also said, like Dostum, that we prefer to negotiate because it is, the problem of Afghanistan cannot be solved by any one of us. It's important for all of us, especially traditional leaders with power and public support, etc. He's made all the right noises. And now, how that translates into political power, how that translates into military power, one cannot say. The other gentleman in the reckoning is the famous Ismail Khan, who was in Herat, if you recollect, while these people were moving in, the Americans, CNN, and everyone said that Ismail Khan will prove to be a thorn in the flesh to the Taliban. But what happened? He just fled to Iran after the Taliban took over. Now, where is he? One really doesn't know whether he signed a secret deal with the Taliban, but he is again a person who has the backing of Iran. And obviously, the Shias, the Hazaras, and the minorities would tend to sort of congregate towards him for support. As of now, he is muted. Now, and he's with Iran. That much we know. The other vicious character in this whole thing is Hekmatyar. And Hekmatyar has again been a very, very violent leader. He was getting the CIA support in the 80s. He fought in that war. He was one of the most brutal militia leaders. And he was prime minister for a short while before the Taliban took power, when I think, who was no, I do not know when. Yeah, a little before 96, he was in power.
Najibullah's time.
No, after Najibullah. After Najibullah, yeah. Before the Burahuddin, yes. At that time, I think that he got assassinated and this guy took over power. But right now, he is, I think, meeting up with Karzai and Abdullah and trying to negotiate. I do not know what he meant, but he said that even if I'm not a minister, we do not have any conditions to participate in this government. And we just want competent people involved. So these are the various factions. And I'll come to later in our discussion about the TTP. I'm not going to talk about it now, but within Afghanistan, these are the factions. But mainly the Taliban is in power, has been there for the last 6 months. There's some semblance of day-to-day, within inverted commas, normal activities taking place. You would have seen videos. Your readers would have also seen videos of Afghanistan, those who are interested. There are a whole lot of sales people, small shopkeepers, teachers, principals, bank workers who have been reduced to selling odds and ends, but there are no buyers. It's a very, very bad state. And unless the Taliban get their act together, sort of put up a semblance of unity and decide that they are working for the Afghan people, it's going to be a very long and difficult haul for them. Do not forget that the Afghan people have enjoyed freedom for 19 years.
Yes.
And tremendous freedom. You see, as long as there was a semblance of security which was provided by the US and its allies, there were schools, there were banks. We've seen delegations and delegations of Afghans visiting India in various fields, whether it was IT, whether it was telecom, civil engineering, schools, culture, entrepreneurship, women heading delegations, women moving all over the world. What has happened to this middle class and upper class? And, everybody, they've just been shouted down by the Taliban. I really do not know where it's going to go, but the Taliban need to get their act together.
No question about that, sir. And one thing, I think there's something interesting that I draw out of what you said, that most of these guys who had some sort of an opposition to the Taliban have either, unconfirmed, but either negotiated a peace so that they can exist within their own little kingdoms, or have basically just moved out of the country and, trying to figure out what they can do about it. So that's one thing that we see when I personally attribute it to the Haqqanis being in power, who are also pretty brutal. They probably hoped that Baradar would have taken over, was a little more mellow fellow. But I personally attribute it towards this, and probably they saw what happened in the Panjshir, and you know.
You see, a lot of information is not coming out because there aren't any foreign correspondents moving about freely over there in Kabul and in the surrounding areas. There are unconfirmed reports about the Taliban having picked up people close to the previous regime, especially intelligence operatives, and dealing with them Taliban style, threatening their families and whatnot. But these are just unconfirmed reports. I will not go entirely by them, but I will not also put it beyond the Taliban to seek revenge.
True, sir, and we don't know the other side of the story as well. So
yeah. So let's.
It's critical. So coming to the, as you put it, as the big brother, Pakistan has been harboring the Taliban for a long time. The world knows it, doesn't do anything about it. Different story, different discussion altogether. But Pakistanis are hard bent, and especially Imran Khan is hard bent on bringing up Afghanistan and its situation, recognition of Taliban. They did this whole OIC conference, which they themselves now say that it was a failure. In every international forum that they've gone to or they've represented themselves, even during the climate talks, he was, talking about the same. He had a passing reference to Afghanistan as well. I somehow fail to understand the logic behind it, sir, because apart from that whole dead concept of strategic depth that they had, what else are they getting out of this whole mention of Afghanistan again and again and again and again and again? And how many agains you can put is anybody's guess.
We'll talk about their concept of strategic depth a little later. But firstly, let us not forget that when the Taliban moved in and took over power in Kabul forcibly, the first cheerleader for them was Imran Khan, who said that they have overthrown shackles of slavery. I mean, who were Afghan slaves to? They're a proud people, even if they're the Taliban or they are anybody. The Taliban is entirely ethnic Afghans, or belonging to various tribes, mainly the Pashtun tribes. So slavery from whom? Not from the Americans, surely. Americans didn't hold them slaves. Who was holding them slaves? Who was holding them? Who was treating them badly, playing one faction against the other? It was Pakistan. So was he singing actually sounding a death knell to say that they've broken the shackles of slavery? That means Afghanistan today is free from Pakistan's influence and they are doing pretty much what they want. Okay, let's get back to this meeting of 19 December 2021. So what was the meeting? The meeting, it called 57 foreign ministers of the OIC attended, 70 observers attended. It was to give a formal recognition to the Taliban. Pakistan called it for that purpose, as well as to draw attention, set up a fund. But what was apparent? The rift between Saudi Arabia and Pakistan was so apparent. They pushed for recognition of Taliban as a legitimate government of Afghanistan, but were unsuccessful. Do remember in the 90s when the Taliban formed the government, there were 3 countries that recognized that government: Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar, and the UAE. Today, they are not recognizing this government. Despite Pakistan pushing for it, Pakistan itself has not recognized the government. They wanted to establish in this meeting a contact group for Afghanistan. Saudis did not agree. And Imran Khan's, this doomsday appeal, please engage with the OIC. Not one country, please engage with Afghanistan. Not one country has pledged anything. Who has pledged it? Even China is not jumping in. Turkey, on the other hand, has decided to sell 100 of its NATO-grade drones to India, and followed by a joint venture. Turkey stopped talking about jihad, stopped talking about Afghanistan. What did Malaysia do? Malaysia, a few months ago, booted out Mahathir Mohamad, and India, in return, opened up the imports of palm oil. What has Qatar done? Qatar made a new overtures to India to sell crude and natural gas in favorable terms. Qatar is also making up with Saudi Arabia. Please understand, Saudi Arabia under Mohammed bin Salman is a completely different Saudi Arabia than what Pakistan depended on. There is much financial chaos in Afghanistan. There's nothing forthcoming except a trickle of humanitarian aid. There are no development funds on offer. The Americans have refused to return 9.5 billion. IMF has withheld 440 million aid. What is Pakistan getting out of it? Well, Pakistan is running around, literally like a headless chicken. Their economy is in shambles. The Saudis have given them a loan and said, we'll withdraw it any time. I mean, humiliating conditions, they've accepted loans. And they are tom-tomming for Afghanistan. Let me tell you something, Aadi, you and your viewers. What I firmly believe is that on one issue, if the Taliban agree and open up schools and colleges and have separate women colleges and women's schools, one can understand that and not co-ed given their strict adherence to Islamic values. Once they open up that and they show and they invite foreign observers, the aid will start coming in. And this time, no aid will be routed through Pakistan. It will come in directly. The US and their allies needed Pakistan earlier. They don't need them anymore. They can deal with Afghanistan directly, provided Pakistan does not interfere. Now, to the issue that you raised about strategic depth. Let us understand what is strategic depth in terms of Afghanistan. You see, British India, we have to go back to British India to understand it. The Indus was flowing right down. East Punjab and east of the Indus was the core area of British Punjab. That is why they designated this area beyond that as the Northwest Frontier Province in Afghanistan and use it as a buffer zone in the great game. Russia may come in. This will provide a strategic depth to the Punjab and to Delhi. Now, Pakistanis, when they, after independence, everything else, they realized that Afghanistan, we can't have a state, a country too friendly to India. In the 60s, Afghanistan was a very modern state. It was like any other socialist country, earlier under a monarchy and then later on socialism. The women used to wear skirts, they used to go to colleges. You've seen photographs. They had bars, they had restaurants, they had everything going for them. A poor country, but they had all that. But Pakistan decided to use this as a strategic depth to have a pliant Pakistan-friendly regime in Afghanistan that can counter and imagine encirclement of Pakistan by India. I mean, how India is going to go across to the north and the west of Afghanistan to come into Pakistan is not understood. Or if India forged ahead, would it mean that the Pakistani army rushes to Afghanistan to lick their wounds, recuperate, organize themselves to launch an offensive while leaving their citizens within inverted commas at the mercy of India? I mean, this is an absolutely asinine version of strategic depth. They have not understood the meaning of it. It is absolute bankruptcy in their thought process. A couple of the generals used to go on air and talk about strategic depth, and it acquired a certain salience. But today, what do you do? What is a strategic depth? Today, it is a Taliban that is well poised to cause immense churning in Pakistan. They have not recognized the Durand Line. No government of Afghanistan has ever recognized the Durand Line. The Pakistani establishment has to realize while it may boast of adequate strategic depth, the Taliban also is capable of extracting its share of the depth from Pakistan. That has to be understood. And if you go by statements of some Taliban leaders, I'll come to that, they have gone ahead and said, no, but Pakistan has to come under Sharia law. What kind of Pakistan is this? So who's going to use Pakistan? Is it the Taliban going to use the Pakistan? Or are you going to use Pakistan and the Pakistanis to expand on their ideology? After all, don't forget they've scored a bloodless, virtually a bloodless victory over the US. Yeah, and faster than Hitler's blitzkrieg. They moved in, captured Kabul before anyone realized what was happening. What was the statement President Biden made in April? And when the offensive actually started in July, by 15th August, it was over. The Taliban flag was flying on the presidential palace. So the Taliban, do not forget, are emboldened. They said if we can do this, and if they really get their kind of government in place, Pakistan can kiss the dreams of strategic depth as far as India is concerned. To think that Afghanistan will give it strategic depth, they can forget about it. That's not going to happen.
The interesting part is that the Pakistanis have sold themselves this story so well that I think they've started believing their own lies now. So
correct. No, they brainwash themselves. They think that we are successful. They were very happy. I still can't get rid of the image in my mind of General Hamid going over there and, having a cup of coffee in the Serena Hotel, preening his feathers like a peacock, saying, yeah, we are here and, we have taken charge.
Everything will be all right.
The Taliban have shown them who's taken charge.
Yeah. That's true. So in the middle you mentioned about humanitarian aid, and if Taliban does take a few steps, they would be able to. I think Taliban is more likely to get humanitarian aid than the Pakistanis are. That's where I would.
Yes. So you're very right.
Yeah.
They're the ones who need the aid. They've been driven. By some estimates, they say that they will be 97% of Afghans will be living below the poverty line in another few months.
Yes.
97%. Can you imagine 97% of a country? This is worse than Sudan.
Yeah. Or Somalia.
And this, we are talking about a modern Afghanistan that was coming up, that had a parliament, that had schools, colleges, banks. They were functioning like any other normal country.
$9.5 billion on top of it.
Yes, $9.5 billion is being held up. The US is not going to release it in a hurry.
Absolutely.
Till they meet certain conditions.
Yeah, that's true. So one thing that we also see that the Pakistanis, of course, as a joke, a lot of us mention that the outsourcing of the job of begging for Afghanistan has been given to Imran Khan and all that. It's a good pun. Having said that,
yes,
he's been doing the job. There's no question about it. He's been raising the issue up quite often, and he's been kind of selling the whole story of humanitarian crisis and this and that pretty well. Nobody's there to listen to him. Different story altogether. But it's not for the lack of effort. Having said that, we also have Hamid Karzai, who came out and said that Imran Khan doesn't need to do this for us. We can figure it out ourselves. If we get it, we get it. We don't get it, whatever it is, we'll face it. And Afghans are quite proud people that way. I mean, they're not going to. We've never seen till date a Taliban minister or anybody for that matter from there coming out and saying, "Humko kuch de do, problem ho raha hai, mar rahe hain log." Nothing.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
That's not happened, and they are now coming out and telling Pakistan, "Please stay in your place. Stop it. We don't need all this stuff. If people give it to us, fair enough. Otherwise, we'll deal with whatever comes our way." I don't understand this whole thing, and it's very confusing. So, how do you see the situation?
Okay, first let's start in August itself. The Taliban spokesman said Pakistan is like a second home for us. Yes, he pledged to deepen strategic ties with Pakistan. He says Afghanistan shared its borders with Pakistan. We are aligned when it comes to religion. People mingle with each other. We are looking forward to deepening ties and things of the sort. Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mohammad Qureshi He said, be realistic, show patience, engage, don't isolate Afghanistan. So this is the way they started approaching the issue. But now the Pakistan government is proposing that the international community develop some kind of a roadmap that leads to diplomatic recognition of Taliban, with incentives if they fulfill those requirements. And one of the incentives is this business about human rights and equal rights for women. But if you go by the congressional hearings on Afghanistan a few, I think this was 2 months ago.
Yes.
The Joint Chief of Staff's, US Chairman, Joint Chief of Staff, General Mark Milley, he said we need to examine the role of Pakistan giving them a sanctuary to understand how the Taliban prevailed in such a quick time. What did Antony Blinken say? Yeah, this was in September or October.
Yes.
He says, we are going to look ahead. We will see the role that Pakistan has played over the last 20 years. We will examine it. And we will do what it takes to see how we engage Islamabad. They were not very clear or forthcoming in what they were saying. And you also know that your readers may not know that there were some lawmakers, again in the Congress, who have proposed a bill to sanction the new Taliban government along with the other bills. And the bill is also called for including who all supported the Taliban by state and non-state actors, including the government of Pakistan between 2001 to 2020. We all know what happened in the Tora Bora caves that the US bombed.
True.
Who helped Mullah Omar, Osama bin Laden, and all these characters to run away and find safe havens across the border. And they were said we have to look at the provisions of sanctuary, space, financial support, intelligence, logistics, medical support, training, equipping, all that. Where did that come from? The Americans realized that the Pakistanis were using US dollars to fund activities against the US. And they've been playing all along because they felt that they needed Pakistan's support to continue supporting their soldiers in Afghanistan. Today, there's not a single US soldier deployed in Afghanistan. They don't need Pakistan anymore. And Pakistan is actually alarmed because what leverage does it now have other than to say that, look, we've got nuclear weapons? I mean, whom are you going to use those nuclear weapons against? So Imran Khan has been calling for humanitarian relief, fair enough. Liquidity, fair enough. We must strengthen and stabilize the government of Afghanistan, fair enough. But then, where is your credibility? The Americans also don't want Pakistan to immediately recognize the Taliban government. And that it exercises its leverage. Yes, they want them to exercise. They say, okay, now you happy to have got them, your DGISI went there. Now you ensure that they make concessions over women's rights, girls' education, form an inclusive government. Today they've got some token, one odd Hazara or one odd somebody else from some other tribe representing, but they're essentially Pashtuns. There's not a single woman in the cabinet. So Washington's needs in Afghanistan has suddenly reduced. Now they need the US more than the US needs Pakistan.
True.
And today the US will not kind of turn a blind eye to any sanctuary in Pakistan. And let me tell you, God forbid, if there's an attack on any Western interests emanating from anywhere in Afghanistan or Pakistan, they will not hesitate to bomb the place.
That's it.
And reduce it to smithereens. Pakistan's let us forget, while Pakistan may keep harping on Afghanistan, the US has changed its goals, changed its priorities. Now they're looking east. They're looking at building a relationship with India, South Korea, Japan. They need to contain China. They've realized, despite Biden's earlier stance on China, he has come to realize that China is their main adversary or foe, and they need to do something to contain China. Otherwise, China will sort of roll over everyone, starting with Taiwan. India can hold its own, but on our land borders. But surely, the Quad will see a strengthening of this, and Pakistan can continue to keep shouting from the rooftops. But unless they are able to make the Taliban deliver, the US and the West is not likely to give any humanitarian aid. And ditto with the Islamic countries organization of the OIC. They are also not going to give. They've not pledged a penny. So Pakistan is in a tight spot. They understand what it means, and they have to get the Taliban to act. They need to use their good offices with the Taliban. But the point is, the Taliban, as we have just discussed, is not a homogeneous body. They have factions, and every faction is armed. It's not like factions in political parties across in democratic nations where they shout, fight bitterly, go into the TVs, denounce another part of the faction, sometimes, I mean, openly, sometimes within the closed doors. Here they'll just shoot each other if it comes to that, which has happened earlier with Mullah Brother, or supposed to have happened, yeah. So Pakistan can keep doing it, but they have to walk the talk now. That's the point I'd like to make.
That's a big if, sir.
Yes, certainly.
Sir, you actually, I got a thought when you were talking. One of the things that the US is actually harping on is for the Pakistanis to kind of rein in the Taliban and try and get the inclusivity and stuff like that.
Yes.
The Taliban doesn't seem to be looking in that particular direction because the kind of orders that they've issued recently, no music, women can't be traveling on their own. They've cut off heads from mannequins which are there in shops, and so on and so forth. It's interesting. Why? Because one actually realizes that it is the hardline faction within the Taliban which has more control over the daily governance of the place. And that particular faction, we know, is not very favorable to Pakistan. So either the US doesn't know about this, or are they kind of pushing the Pakistanis into a spot?
You see, the optics from the Taliban side will always be there. They couldn't be bothered. Cutting off heads of mannequins is a far cry from cutting off heads of women, which they were doing in their earlier avatar. So to that extent, you can grant it to them. Women have suddenly started putting on burqas, covering their faces completely, whereas earlier, a few months ago, they were just wearing headscarves and moving around. There will be this overt establishment of Islamic values, which will occupy the visuals insofar as Afghanistan is concerned. But even the hardline know they have to release their monies. Today, how are they managing? There are reports that the Afghan government is collecting 2,000 Afghanis from every family as tax every month. There are reports of drug trade going on pretty openly. Now, they need finances to run the place. Their accounts have been locked. I mean, what would you do as a head of a family if a bank account is locked and you have to feed a large family? Where will you go? You will do all that is necessary to ensure that the accounts get unblocked. And that is what the Taliban have realized, that even humanitarian aid in that sense is not going to be flowing. And if the aid is flowing, it is going to the people. India has sent aid, but India has sent aid to the people. I mean, fine, you have no choice that the Taliban will decide whom it goes to. And unfortunately, it will first go to the fighters and their families rather than to the common man. The other thing is, what are you going to do with so many armed soldiers loafing around all over the streets? Where is the enemy? Whom are they fighting? You see, Taliban today realizes they need something like the erstwhile Loya Jigra to get everyone together, to sit down, to have a council. There must be some wise guys. Let us not forget that they have negotiated with the Americans over a period of a year and got this deal through. They managed to keep Ghani and his government outside the deal. They know how to negotiate. They have also seen the life in Qatar and UAE and everything else. And they know they are also Islamic countries. You must have been to Dubai, you must have been to Sharjah. I mean, when you go to these places, you don't realize you're in within inverted commas, an Islamic country. Everything is available. Fine, Muslims have to lead their life by a certain code of conduct, but that doesn't apply to you or me.
Yeah.
And it's a pretty open society. Saudi Arabia has also realized this. The UAE has shown the way. And these Taliban leaders today who are sitting in Kabul, all of them, without exception, have seen life in their West. That is the Middle East, West Asia. They've seen life there. They know what it's like. And they know that Afghanistan today is Afghanistan has been at crossroads right throughout its history. But today, more than ever, Afghanistan is at crossroads. How the Taliban negotiate from here, how they take the society forward, will be a huge ask. And everything will depend on that. So, beheading a few mannequins, I won't lay too much store by that. It's a good news item to show that these fellows cannot change. But let me tell you that they have to, they do not have a choice. Because they are not fighting any enemy now. It's for the people. They have to govern, they have to provide jobs, they have to provide education, they have to provide food, shelter, clothing. How are they going to do all that? The war is over. We can't be thinking about the war. Yes, there have been skirmishes, some border tensions between Pakistan and Taliban, but the war is over. What are they going to do fighting with Pakistan? What is Pakistan going to do fighting with them? It's in neither's interest to be fighting. So I am hopeful, that's why I said at the beginning of our discussion that I am hopeful that 2022 will be a better year. Otherwise, it'll sink much, much further into a deeper abyss than ever.
And that's dangerous. That's dangerous not just for the...
That's dangerous for the whole neighborhood, for the world.
Yeah.
Because then it becomes a black hole attracting terror groups from all over.
Yeah, we've got enough around.
But who? That is the point. India has to be very, very careful. India has to be on its guard.
Interesting. So you mentioned about the physical fighting which is happening between the Afghani, I won't call them Afghanis, I'll call them the Taliban regime as well as the Pakistani forces. We saw in the northern side as well as in the southern side close to Balochistan, there were certain places where the border fences were removed. Now, the reasoning that the Pakistanis kind of give is at the northern end, the area is more or less controlled by the TTP. So, smuggling and this and that is required there. And in the southern side, it is more or less to gain an access to Iran for refugees and again, smuggling and this and that to kind of happen. Fair enough. I'll buy that for a moment. But that also does not take away from the factor that the Durand Line has been in question right from, get-go since history. And since probably the line was drawn, there's been a question about it. Now, Pakistanis have put in a soft hand at the moment, but there were also reports of firing. There was also a report of aggressive maneuvers done by the Taliban, and reports of some about 30-odd posts being captured by the Taliban and a couple of soldiers being taken into prisoner and this and that. being from the armed forces, you will understand it just takes that one spark to ignite an entire thing and to just blow up into something. Do you once see that happening sometime? Probably not a war-like situation, but a conflict sort of a thing over a silly little issue like a border fence somewhere. And two, the Durand issue is not going anywhere. So how do you think the Pakistanis are going to deal with it?
Okay, at the start, let me tell you, are you aware that since August, since the Taliban have taken over, there have been about 250 servicemen casualties amongst the Pakistanis, either the rangers or their soldiers or the border outposts or the guards. 250.
It's a lot, sir.
So that's how many months? 6 months?
Yeah, just
15th August to say 15 January?
6 months.
4 months or 5 months. 5 months, 250 casualties. That means 50 casualties a month. That means approximately 2 casualties a day.
A day. My God.
So this is what we should see. And who's fighting? It's a TTP, Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan. It's the largest militant organization fighting against Pakistan. There are thousands of fighters, strongholds on both sides of the Afghanistan-Pakistan border. They do not recognize the border. I mean, the government itself, whichever government has been in Afghanistan, has not recognized the Durand Line, and more so the TTP. TTP had their infighting. There was a decline from, say, 2014 to 2018, 2019. But since then, it has merged ever since the US started making the peace deal. There were a number of militant groups that have merged with the TTP. The Pakistani affiliates of Al-Qaeda and 4 major factions that had separated from TTP earlier have moved back. And TTP violence has become more frequent.
Daily?
Yes. Now you've seen it for yourself. We've given you figures. There are over 250. It still has covert links with Al-Qaeda. And it says that it looks to the Afghan Taliban leaders as their own. And they will enjoy the safe haven there as long as Taliban rule Afghanistan. They know it. And what is IS Khorasan that I had spoken to about earlier? Basically, your TTP chaps only. But they have not physically fought with each other. So, your Khorasan and TTP have, I think, according to me, they've got a live and let live attitude towards each other. And in 2020, the TTP claimed they have no regional or global agenda beyond Pakistan. So nobody is bothered about them. The West is not bothered. India is not bothered about them particularly because India is more concerned about the groups that are fighting in Kashmir. So then who has to be worried about the TTP other than Pakistan? There's nobody else. Ashraf Ghani has shouted from the rooftops when he was the president, saying that the Pakistan government is harboring anti-Afghan groups. Pakistan accused Ghani of harboring TTP. Ghani has accused Pakistan of harboring anti-Afghan groups. So, where do we stand today? Afghan Taliban also released hundreds of TTP prisoners.
How? Yeah. That's the first thing they did.
If you recollect, remember the rallies that they took out and caravans and the videos showing how they've taken over? They've got complete operational freedom. And when you say operational freedom, that means they can do pretty much what they want. The Taliban is not going to take them off or rein them in. The TTP has publicly renewed their allegiance to the Taliban. They have, in fact, told the world, told their followers that the Afghan Taliban is a role model. And if you persevere in war, if you can throw out the US, we could throw out the Soviet Union earlier. And what is the Pakistani state? We will guarantee you a victory against Pakistan because their aim is Sharia-oriented Pakistan. And Pakistan is not helping their own cause by each faction in every party, political party, claiming to be more Islamist than the other. And you saw the lynching of the Sri Lankan national. So it is all building to a crescendo. TTP has claimed responsibility for a large number of attacks. So their main concern, as I've said, is the implementation of Sharia in Pakistan based on their interpretation. They said we will not lay down arms until this goal is achieved. And Taliban is not going to act against the TTP. So Pakistan is worried, and understandably so.
True, sir. And why would they take any action against the TTP? That's probably their hidden weapon to put pressure on towards the Pakistanis. I mean,
true.
The Pakistanis stand up, tuck, and that's shows a little bit.
That's a right deduction. That's a very correct deduction that you've made.
But do you feel that this whole line will get extended in terms of the actions? Why I ask this is because the Pakistanis signed up a ceasefire with India in February last year. A lot of people don't agree with that. Fair enough. That's a different discussion for a different day. Just to basically relieve their forces from the Indian border, take them over to the Afghanistan side, help out. We know about the Panjshir action. We know about certain other action that was taken within Afghanistan by some of the SSG commando groups and stuff like that. With now the pressure building up on the Afghan side of the border with these constant clashes, and as I said, a threat of an extension of this clash of the border fencing, how do you think the Pakistanis are now going to balance this situation? Having said the fact that they've now fingered Punjab, they're trying to refinger on to J&K. We are in the middle of winter. The snow will melt in another couple of months. What's going to happen?
Let me start on a happy note. Indian and Pakistani soldiers exchanged sweets on New Year's. Cross LC, shook hands, and got photo ops and said, yes, mutual trust, tranquility must prevail. And then what happened last week? A Pakistani national was killed while attempting to infiltrate. His identity card was recovered. So Pakistan has been following this issue of plausible deniability. They will continue to do so. They will not overtly encourage militants to cross over, but covertly, under the shadow, support is there. One is not privy to operational issues, but you can safely say that the training camps are there. They will turn a blind eye, and they must be there because of this repeated infiltration attempts that are going on. 2020 saw over 5,000 incidents of ceasefire violations, which is amongst the highest. And they have reduced except for this attempts at infiltration, which will keep happening. That's not going to slow down. But certainly exchange of either mortar fire or machine gun fire, all that has practically gone down completely now. As far as the western border is concerned, Pakistan is more concerned, according to my analysis and from what I've been reading and studying and discussing with other friends and colleagues, Pakistan is more concerned with what is happening in the western border. As late as Friday, today is Wednesday, right? And Friday, there were 4 soldiers of Pakistani soldiers were killed. The Pakistani troops say they raided a Taliban hideout in North Waziristan. And but we really do not know what's happened, whether 4 have been killed or more have been killed. So the TTP will continue to trouble them on their western borders. On the eastern border, I really do not know. As of now, Pakistan cannot afford to up the ante because they know that India will hit and hit back hard. And they can ill afford a deployment, a further deployment of forces on their eastern border. Balochistan is one place we should be looking at. The violence is heavy there. Separatist Baloch militant groups are operating there. So does the TTP and the IS groups. The CPEC corridor, as we all know, nothing much is happening despite them trying an infusion of funds. Chinese engineers have been kidnapped and killed. So it's all very restive. It's all happening that side. This side, you will continue to see militancy in J&K, especially in the Kashmir Valley. But beyond that, on the line of control per se, I do not visualize it flaring up, although it can at any time. One incident can set it off. So we will have to see what happens, especially since, if you recollect, there was a truce sometime earlier between the TTP and the Pakistan army. But then the truce TTP refused to extend it. I think it expired sometime in December because they accused the Pakistani authorities of breaching the deal. Since then, they've resumed their attacks. So for decades, while this relationship has been tense, many Afghans view Pakistan as a power that interferes in their domestic affairs. And the Taliban now in power, okay, as long as, see, they have their interests in mind. Do not forget. They are not playing to the Pakistani gallery. They need to get their nation going. Let's not ever forget that. So to keep the nation going, if they have to dump Pakistan, so be it.
Mm-hmm.
Pakistan has much less leverage over the Afghans today than they had at any other time in their history. And I think I'm making quite a categorical statement by saying this. Though on the surface it appears that a Pakistan-friendly government is in power, but now that they're in power, things can be and are quite different, as is being seen by people who are observing the situation closely.
I'd agree to that because the Haqqani network was the main connect between, the IS as well as Al Qaeda and the extreme forces that were present in the region, and they were basically the coordinators at one time, as per what some stuff that I've read here and there, and they went out of the ISI's control at a certain point of time. So that's interesting to find out how the Taliban regime itself, sitting on the throne in Afghanistan, would react to the world in case they do get some sort of a friendly overture from any particular organization from the world. What would happen to the future of their association with Pakistan would be interesting to find out, sir. So
yes,
the Pakistanis probably, when they actually wanted to establish the Taliban into Afghanistan, they would have actually sat down and said, I'll give you the support. I need the TTP kind of controlled. I need this, I need that, I need the Durand Line settled down, or whatever the deal that they had. But I guess the TTP would have been on the top of the list, But today we see that the Afghans are treating the Pakistanis exactly the same way that the Pakistanis treated the Taliban in the US. The Pakistanis was instrumental in bringing the US and the Taliban onto the same table and have a chat and sort things out. Today, the Taliban is saying the same thing to the Pakistanis, that listen, we'll bring the TTP and you on the same table, so you sit down and have a chat and sort this out. So my question is that have they miscalculated this entire thing?
That's right. Let's not forget that the peace deal, the peace talks that led to this 30-day ceasefire sometime in October, November, was with the help of the Taliban. Taliban got Pakistan and TTP to the table, but the ceasefire collapsed in 30 days. Now, Pakistan has miscalculated. They relied on blind support of the Taliban, let's face it. The Taliban and the Afghan people are no fools. Even hardcore Islamists among the Taliban know what Pakistan has done to them and what India has done for them. Please understand this. They know what India has done for Afghanistan and know what Pakistan has done to Afghanistan. And today, Afghanistan now desperately needs aid. I don't think the Taliban have an appetite for a fight, but it will not hesitate to put Pakistan in its place. That is why Pakistan is trying to maneuver. They have far less wriggle room today than they had in the yesteryears.
That is true.
And maybe that celebration of the DGISI Serena Hotel over coffee and not champagne was a little too premature. Just maybe.
Yes,
so we shall have to watch this space. It will be interesting to revisit this discussion in a few months' time to see as to where they've gone, because with these harsh winters there, with no humanitarian aid coming over, people are ready to give aid. All countries are ready to give aid, but they want some kind of guarantees. That that the aid won't fall into the wrong hands. B, that you treat your citizens equally. Fine, there are other Islamic countries in the world. The women are, as far as I know, other than places which are ravaged by war, women are studying, they're equal partners. Okay, a little less than equal, may not be equal partners, but a little less than equal partners. They're getting jobs, they're seeing the sisters in the West and in other countries like Bangladesh, like India.
Even Saudi now.
Even Saudi Arabia. There are women driving, there are women doing everything. And so the Taliban understand it. They're no fools. And Pakistan has got much less wiggle room today. So let's see what happens. But as of now, there is apart from these incidents, and 250 killed in the last 5 months is no small measure. There is serious problems that Pakistan has on their western borders, and the threat from that side is far more serious than the threat from India. They also know it.
They do.
They know it. And they have understood the strategic concept depth of theirs. Theory has gone out of the window. They realize that there's no such thing as strategic depth right now. So we will see as to how this plays out. But at the moment, I would put it as even Stevens, the Taliban and Pakistan, both not in a good place, both trying to get out. And we shall see. But I would like to lastly conclude by saying that we are all for the Afghan people. The Afghan people and Indian people have been friends over the years from our Kabuliwala days, and especially since relative peace returned to Afghanistan, India has been a very major player, helping them out. India's soft power is evident in building roads, building dams, power stations, in building the parliament, in building the cricket stadium, setting up schools, hospitals, sending our nurses, our doctors there. I mean, India has been there in every thread of the warp and weft of Afghan life. And Afghanistan surely know this, the Afghans surely know this, the Taliban know it better than anyone.
Absolutely.
Whether Pakistan likes it or not, India's presence there from afar or from near is always going to be there to help the people of Afghanistan.
Thank you. I think that's a wonderful conclusion, which is true. And as a matter of fact, we see it when we wanted to send grain. I think Pakistanis were the only one who had a problem. Afghanistan never said anything. We sent vaccines. They said thank you.
Yes.
And the official spokesperson came out and said, we thank India for whatever contribution that they
correct.
across. So that's something that needs to be.
No, they understand it. That's what I'm saying. They know fully well. And India also knows where it stands insofar as Afghanistan is concerned.
Absolutely. Coming to a little bit of a funny anecdote that I just noted down here is that I'm sure the Taliban is also wondering, yaar, ye kahan phas gaye? We can't have Pakistan representing us. Bottom of the barrel, we are under the barrel, and here's the bottom of the barrel trying to represent us. Well, we need to find someone better to, take the matter forward, because otherwise, if the Pakistanis themselves can't help themselves, what will they help the Taliban or the Afghan people for that matter? And I think that's something that they would understand pretty clearly. Understand. Sir, thanks so much for, one, taking us through all these, the first answer especially was a bit of an eye-opener for myself. I've written down all the guys that you mentioned for me to actually, there are two of them that I just, my dostam, I kind of missed out in the middle and update on him. So I'm going to read up a little more on what he's up to nowadays. So it's interesting to see all these guys that are still in the picture. And
very much,
they might
though they are in self-imposed exile. I would put it that way.
In this world, it's a difficult story to say, and as you brought out,
yeah,
it's difficult. Who's standing with whom? It's damn difficult.
Who's standing with whom? You can't say that. Yeah.
I mean, Amarullah Saleh, who was such a vocal person, probably I heard his name today when you mentioned it. For so long, he's just been off the air.
Yeah, he's been off the grid, yes.
Yeah, there's no tweets. Otherwise, he used to tweet once in a week, something there. I haven't heard anything from Ahmadullah Masood's or Ahmad Masood's, Twitter ID and the Panchi Resistance Force and this and that. It's all gone. Either they're licking their wounds and trying to step up again, or God knows.
One really doesn't know. You see, the situation will take a while to stabilize.
True.
But I think the Taliban right now are more concerned about seeing their people through this huge humanitarian crisis that's facing them.
And building up an army of suicide bombers. That's what they recently put out. So I just wanted to throw that.
That we shall see. That maybe a faction or so, TTP, yes, you can rule out, but not the Taliban who are actually in. I mean, whom are the suicide bombers? Whom's the Haqqani, for example? Whom is he going to use the suicide bombers against today?
They've mentioned
against his own people.
Yeah,
against his own people.
They've actually.
Whom is he going to use it against?
Against opposition to the regime.
Who? It's not happened.
Yeah,
it's not happened. Who's opposing the regime? Is there anyone opposing the regime?
I don't see anybody.
Then, so that is the point. They are having internal dissensions. How that will work out? Who will emerge stronger? Whether there'll be bloodletting or whether right now all the top leaders seem to be intact. I mean, their heads remain joined with the torsos so far. So let's see.
Except the main guy who mysteriously died and no one came to know about it. Akhundzada.
Akhundzada, yes. Akhundzada, yes.
Fair enough.
That is true.
It's a mystery that will resolve, sir, and I'd love to, catch up with you for an update probably in the next couple of months on this particular subject, and probably in the next sometime on another subject. Till then, sir, thank you so much for a very, very, in-depth preparation that you've done and taken this story forward. It's an interesting conversation for any listener that would find it. Thank you so much. Till next time, sir. Jai Hind.
Thank you, Aadi. Thank you and your viewers. And God bless you and have a great year ahead.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. All the best. Jai Hind.
Jai Hind, sir.